শ্যামেরে বাঁশি বিনোদিয়া গো সই, ওই যে খালার বাঁশি, ও শ্যামেরে বাঁশি বিনোদিয়া গো সই, ওই যে খালার বাঁশি। বাঁশি না হয়, বাঁশি না হয় করলে বাঁশের আগা, বাঁশি না হয়, বাঁশি না হয় করলে বাঁশের আগা। নাম দরিয়া বাজায় বাঁশি কলঙ্কিনী রাধায়, দেখো নাম দরিয়া বাজায় বাঁশি কলঙ্কিনী রাধা। শ্যামের বাঁশি, ও শ্যামের বাঁশি বিনোদিয়া গো সই, ওই যে খালার বাঁশি।
The reason why I chose handlooms was because of the versatility and also the basic structure. Like, it was so basic and it was so grounded. It was almost like a canvas which is blank and you could just do whatever you want on that. Whether you could paint, you could tear it off, or you could do anything, you could burn it. So handloom is something like that. It's absolutely a basic structure is there in front of you, like a white canvas, and then it's up to you what you want to do with it.
Weaving is one of the oldest technologies known to humanity. It consists of the interlacing of two sets of fibers. One set, held under tension, is called the warp. The other, running perpendicular to the warp, is called the weft. To keep the warp threads under tension, a frame of some kind is used. The frame is known as a loom. Loom technology is versatile and adaptable. In its simplest form, the loom takes its tension from the body of the weaver and some stationary object, such as a tree. This type of loom is portable. Once untied from its supports, it may be rolled up and easily moved. All looms, from the simple to the most complex, have the same basic features. A shed. The shed is the space made by lifting up selected warp threads so that the shuttle can pass through. The most basic weave is created by first lifting odd threads and then lifting even threads. This is known as a plain weave or tabby. The shuttle contains a bobbin which holds the weft thread. Once the shuttle is passed through the shed, a beater is used to pack the thread against the already woven material. The beater can be a simple stick, or it can be what is called a reed. A reed acts like a large comb and has teeth which pass between the warp threads. The heddle allows the weaver to create a shed by lifting selected threads. More complex heddles allow for more complex weaves. The jacquard mechanism allows heddles to be controlled through a set of punched cards. This particular innovation transformed the weaving industry. It was also used as the means to import data into the first generation of computers. As may be expected, there are regional variations and novelties to all parts of the loom. Handlooms are still used throughout the world. The global need for cloth, however, has driven technologies which can produce yardage at amazing rates. The fastest handloom can produce no more than about 5 meters per day. and this is under ideal conditions. The average modern mill, on the other hand, can produce between 250 and 300 meters per day. It is not possible for the handloom operator to compete with industrial mills. The individual, and even the cooperative, does not have the production capacity, the speed, the marketing power, or the distribution networks to go up against industrial mills. The combination of computer technology with industrial production might suggest that there is no place in the future for the hand loom or the hand weaver.
I think people who are specializing in a particular thing are the people who would survive, because otherwise these huge mills coming in from all over the world would be flooding the whole world market with their huge production capacities. So therein I think handloom stands a very good chance of surviving, and India I think would survive only because of its craftsmanship, and handloom being one of them that can create such versatile, such beautiful different feel fabrics and different weave structures, and handloom stands a very good chance to survive.
The fabrics created by the hand weaver have their own market. They are prestige cloths woven with passion, ingenuity, creativity, and skill.
One of the most interesting things about West African textiles is the technique of weaving on a narrow strip horizontal loom. The most sophisticated of these looms are found in Ghana amongst the Ashanti and the Ewe. But these are found all over West Africa, say from Sierra Leone in the west right the way through to Nigeria and Cameroon in the east. It's traditionally a male occupation, and in fact there were in most places a strict taboo. It is solely a male occupation, but in Nigeria, with changes in the last 20 or so years, girls are starting to weave on these looms. The way the cloth is put together is to weave a very long strip, 200 feet or more long, and then cut it up into the requisite lengths, which is about 5 feet long, and then sew them together selvage to selvage. The moving parts of the loom are the heddles, the comb, the beater, etc., are all quite small and as such are portable. The weaver will often go to his work, so he may walk 50 miles or so to the next job. When he gets to his new place of work, he can just get out a machete, cut down some brushwood and create the frame for his loom. They've got two sets of heddles to do the various bits of it, some of which are warp face, some of which are weft face, and they use two different sets of heddles to do that. And with the Ewe and the Ashanti, they will even have an extra set of heddles to do all the little complicated bits, the geometric or figurative elements in their weave. And the warps, which can be incredibly long, 200 feet or more, will stretch out in front of them, and these will be tied around a stone, and the stone will be put onto a little wooden sledge, and it provides the tension. A lot of the cloths that come into Western collections are prestige cloths, woven for chiefs, men of prestige and whatever, and then maybe very rarely worn, sort of once a year or even less often than that. These are big, sort of heavy-duty prestige cloths. Places like Ghana, where there is still, Ghana is a rich country, it's got disposable wealth, and they'll spend them on prestige textiles. Now, a piece of Japanese synthetic material. These are light and they're common and they are relatively cheap, but they haven't got the prestige of a beautifully woven, an incredibly intricately woven Ashanti Kanti cloth. that's one factor. The other interesting cloth that became a symbol of African independence was the mud cloths from Mali, which are done by painting mud onto a white strip woven cloth that's been steeped in a mordant which contains tannin. So these were used to dress up I think it was the hostesses at the cinema when they had an international film festival in Bamako in Mali. So they just used these as sort of uniforms where everybody was handing out the brochures for this international film festival. And I don't know who's sort of thought, oh, this is wonderful. It might have been somebody from the outside. It might have been somebody in the fashion world in Paris, for instance. But they thought, oh, this is wonderful. People saw this as symbolic of African art and something that was readily available because people could make it. They were relatively cheap to buy. And that again became a symbol of this rising, the renaissance of Africa after independence.
One place where hand-weaving has actually increased is on the island of Sumba in eastern Indonesia. Here they weave an incredibly complex supplementary weft textile, which was originally used as the border for a sarong. The close proximity of a major tourist market in Bali encourages the production of textiles with what are known as primitif designs. These make much of the island's headhunting past. On Sumba, weaving was always the exclusive occupation of the female aristocratic class. With increased trade, traditional boundaries separating gender roles begin to break down. Before weaving can begin, the loom must be set up. Here, two women prepare a continuous warp. There are many ways to prepare the warp threads. The method used will depend on the type of loom and the type of cloth being made. A prepared warp is also an opportunity to add designs to the cloth through tying some of the fibers before they are dyed. This method is known as ikat. Sumba and other islands of the Indonesian archipelago are famous for their ikat. A detailed pattern can involve several immersions in different dyes, and the yarns will be tied and untied for each color. It takes a skillful weaver to maintain a clear design through the weaving process. Ikat is such an effective technique for the incorporation of imagery that these weavings are known as story cloths. The finest cloth, elaborately patterned with complex imagery and woven, is used for the funeral ceremonies. The bones of ancestors are kept by the family, wrapped in the cloth and stored in a special chamber of the home. In addition to ikat, the Sumbanese utilize the technique of supplementary warp. A second set of warp threads are incorporated into the ground weave. The supplemental yarns run parallel to the warp and lie over the primary warp. First, the pattern is picked out. Then it is kept in place with a small bamboo splint or pattern stick. These sticks pick up the appropriate supplementary warp threads as the weft is introduced. The pattern will appear on the front of the textile, and the supplement will float on the back. Because the floating threads may be easily caught and pulled loose, higher quality weavings secure the floating supplement at regular intervals. It is one of the paradoxes of weaving that the most complex weaves are often created on very basic looms. Sumbinese supplementary warp is a good example of this, as is their technique of band weaving across the edges of the finished cloth. In order to add the band, the cloth is removed from the loom and turned by 90 degrees. What were previously warp threads now become weft threads as the cloth is finished. As with the main body, ikat techniques are used to introduce patterns into the threads which will make up the bands. For the hand weaver, Sumba has many advantages. It has the raw materials for its own natural dyes, and also the raw materials for spinning and weaving its unique fabrics. It has access to a major tourist market, and most importantly, its cultural heritage is strong.
Every tribe they have 4 or 5 different shawls and the sarongs, but now at present they're using only 1 or 2. So that it means that slowly they're losing it. But every tribe, every Naga woman, they know weaving and they weave at home, so they are never short of their their garments for their families, and that is one thing. But they can't continue in that because there is no market. So and other things that the getting of the raw material, because mostly they weave on the acrylic wool because it is easily available in the market, and the traders from India, they encourage them to do that, which I really want to stop.
Nagaland is situated in the far northeast corner of India. It is remote and relatively inaccessible. Recently, the identities of the 26 distinct Naga tribes began to fade and merge. At the same time, local hand weavers were producing acrylic weaves with simple designs, and they were not selling. In an effort to find a solution, the women began to weave traditional textiles. These were successful in the marketplace and also gave a foothold for the continuation of traditional identity. Samuel Medeliang works with a group of weavers known as the Naga Weavers Tradition.
It started as for the Naga weavers tradition. We have started with only 3 weavers. We don't want to approach any government for any funding, because we want to really show that it can work in itself. After 4 months, we have increased to 5 members, and then in the same year it has gone up to 10 weavers, and we started selling those products, and then the money that we got in return, we reinvested again. We get more yarn, and then now with us we have more than 150 weavers who have been trained, and they come stay here for 6 months, they go back, and they are doing the same thing in their own villages at home now. It's a good sign that everyone is now want to be involved in this. So let's keep on trying and hope for the best.
The Naga textiles deploy a unique supplementary weft, which has tassels appearing in the body of the cloth rather than at the selvage. The region is also known for the exceptional design and beauty of its woven baskets. During a wedding, the woman gives a traditional hand-woven shawl, and the man presents a cane basket. It must be so well made that it will last her entire life. The Naga Weaving Cooperative faces many challenges due to the great distance between weavers and markets. Moreover, there are political tensions between Nagaland, which declared its independence at the time of partition, and India, which does not acknowledge Naga independence. Like many textiles produced by tribal groups, the Naga designs are highly distinctive. Which shawl is worn by an individual is not a matter of personal choice. Rather, the designs indicate marital and social status. The warrior class, which has a tradition of head-taking, would wear an elaborately designed cloth. There are also particular designs for the aristocratic class and for a feast giver. Often, cultural integrity for artisans is regained through small-level trade and through the efforts of international markets with knowledge of quality weavings and foresight into its value. A cascading effect is often witnessed where the revival in weaving markets brings about a revival in dyeing and growing natural fibers, to the point where a community becomes very prosperous. It is a prosperity which the people can claim and guide as their own.
Think about how important it is to an indigenous society where it actually carries a language, it carries the map of their culture, it carries the stories and the history of their families. It's about ritual, it's about beauty, it's about their religion. And each culture is different. We can take Laos, which is extremely literate in the hand-woven field. Of the 5 million people that live in Laos, over 3 million people still hand weave. It's how they define their culture.
The beauty of Laotian textiles is a reflection of the tranquility of life, which the Laotian people feel deeply. Textiles have the power to attract the heart with their exquisite, complex, floating beauty. They reach up like a lotus. Textiles have a powerful forging role in the culture of Laos, to remind people each day to strive for beauty and peace in all activities. For this reason, weaving is considered sacred and its survival is fundamental to the survival of Laotian culture. It is understood in all of Laotian society that weaving is so important that it must involve the consultation of the horoscope. Also, the wearer of such thoughtfully executed weavings must be worthy of such art.
There's no separation between really life, hand weaving, and religion. It's all one. So to pull out hand weaving as something that should stop because a machine can make them is an unrelated parallel, actually, because hand weaving is part of the everyday life-giving force of many cultures. And I speak about Laos because I have much experience there and I can talk in detail, but I also think about small groups of people in Vietnam, the Katu, whose literal textile actually tells the story of their movement and how they came to the place that they now reside in Vietnam. Even the colors are symbolic. The fact that the cloth is tufted, the fact that they use beads and traded, all of that has significance to these people that's beyond just beauty. When your hand weaving tradition is also tied up with your religion, which is tied up with your culture, and then someone takes that away by doing cheap copies in other countries. I will mention China because I just think it has to be mentioned over and over. And so it does take away their identity, and then it dilutes the culture, and then of course the rich artistic tradition disappears. All I can see from that is I see high suicide rates, I see exodus from a culture, and I see the disappearance totally of certain cultures like Laos, because the traditions aren't passed on. They become servants, they take the lowest wage jobs, and then the next generation doesn't know anything. And before you know it, one of the things that makes a culture alive is dead.
ที่นี่โสวทถนนไทย FM 90.5 เมกะเฮิรตซ์จากนี้ไปจะเป็นการถ่ายทอดข่าวสั้นต้นชั่วโมงถ่ายทอดเสียงจากสทกรุงเทพจบแล้วค่ะคุณผู้ฟังจะเป็น
Thank you.
In Laos, the weavers utilize a continuous supplementary weft. The supplemental threads extend from selvage to selvage. Here, the golden supplemental weft threads may clearly be seen. The loom has a regular heddle bar system which is used to make the ground weave. It also has an additional set of heddle strings controlled by pattern sticks. Pattern sticks are used to bring selected heddles closer to the weaver. The weaver then lifts the heddles by hand and slides a flat stick, sometimes called the sword, through to make a shed by turning it sideways. The pattern stick is let fall under the weft, where it will maintain its position in the pattern. This allows the process and the pattern to be repeated. In the Swat Valley, a shed of hand weavers produce wool shawls for the local market. They introduce supplementary weft to add interest and color to the designs. These shawls sell primarily to the drivers of goods carrier trucks. The simplest weave, a tabby weave, requires only 2 heddles. 4 heddles will allow the production of a twill weave. Twill weave is much stronger and will permit heavier fabrics to retain a supple feel. Denim blue jeans are an example of a twill weave. Additional heddles will permit more flexibility in the weave structure. The famous Kez double weave of Pakistan requires 8 heddles. A double weave has 2 sets of warp and weft threads. The weave actually has pockets with complete fabric on both sides. In Pakistan, many types of looms are used. Some require the weaver to throw the shuttle by hand, while others deploy the flying shuttle. The flying shuttle has the advantage of allowing a single weaver to produce very wide fabrics. Unlike India, which saw hand-woven cloth as marking both political and cultural territory, Pakistan promoted and subsidized industrial mills in the hope that it would be viewed as a modern industrial nation. Despite this stance, hand-weaving has survived in Pakistan due to its ability to meet local needs.
বাঁশি না হয় বাঁশি না হয়
The village of Koilgudam in Andhra Pradesh, India, produces weft ikat, warp ikat, and double ikat, made by tying and dyeing both warp and weft fibers. Double ikat is undoubtedly one of the most time-consuming and difficult methods used to introduce patterning to cloth. The village of Koilgudam produces relatively simple motifs. The ikat weft is prepared by first winding the threads onto a winding bench. The bench is slightly larger than the finished width of the cloth to allow for the take-up of the weave. Next, the pattern is marked out and the fibers are tied to resist the dye. In this case, strips of old inner tube are used. When the dye process is complete, the threads are untied and then wound onto bobbins. The dyed pattern is woven into the fabric. The weaving is time-consuming, skilled work, as each pick must be adjusted in order to give a clear motif. As recently as the mid-1980s, Koilgudam and villages like it were held up as a model of the success of the Indian handloom sector. This tedious craft generated a relatively good income and involved every member of the family, from child to grandparent. Sadly, the success was not to last. In the 1990s, textiles dyed with azo dyes were banned by Europe and Japan due to the carcinogenic nature of the dyes. Weavers found themselves with storerooms of finished work, no markets, and rising debts. Koilgudam, which had just recently begun to use traditional natural dyes, was able to survive. The Indian handloom sector employs over 10 million people, or about 1/3 the population of Canada. A slight fluctuation in the market for finished cloth, or for raw materials such as yarn, can have a devastating effect. There is a trend in India towards Western-style dress. The sari no longer appeals to a younger, fashion-conscious market. Governmental encouragement to switch to automated looms has displaced many, and India's new economic growth has encouraged mills to increase production. For many weavers, uneducated and isolated from their markets, times are desperate. The desperation is felt most acutely by those unskilled weavers who work in factory-like conditions and who compete directly with mills and power looms. In 2000 and 2001, there were an unprecedented number of suicides among Indian weavers. In addition to ikat, weavers in Koilgudam also use a discontinuous supplemental weft technique known as jamdani. Here, small figures are placed at regular intervals in a field of fabric. The weaver turns the threads in each individual motif by hand. Many weavers prefer weaving jamdanis, as the turning of the thread provides a break in the operation of the loom. A jamdani pattern may also be made through the use of continuous supplementary weft, in which the unnecessary floating fibers are trimmed off. Here a weaver produces a weft ikat. The bobbins are tied in the order they will be used, with a jamdani in the central field and two jacquard patterns running down each side of the cloth. This particular jacquard mechanism is not controlled by punch cards, but rather through a system of wooden cogs. In India, innovation is everything. The preparation of the warp is fundamental to successful weaving. In much of India, the length of the warp is based on the number of meters used in a sari. A fixed number of saris will be produced in each warping of the loom. A sari length may be anywhere from 3 to 9 meters long. Almost all decisions about the cloth are made before warping begins. Where space is available, the warps are often prepared in the open. The lengths can be checked, and warp threads are starched very quickly. The warp can also be prepared on a warping drum. It is an ingenious mechanism which measures the yarn in preparation for the loom. In India particularly, uncut cloth is considered holy or sacred. Throughout life, the body is wrapped and draped, from the swaddling of a newborn to the funeral shroud. Uncut cloth is also an incredibly practical clothing solution. The problem of correct size vanishes. Any one cloth has a multitude of uses.
Shuage sande bodoni doni naso to dekhi. Shuage sande bodoni doni naso to dekhi.
The state of Orissa in eastern India is famous for the production of tussa silk. Unlike most natural fibers, tussa silk has a flat edge. This gives it an unusual sheen, but also makes it more difficult to work with. The silk is dyed for use in ikat weaving. Orissa has a strong and thriving weaving tradition. Local men and women still wear cloth which has been hand-woven from locally harvested fibers. Here, a woman is preparing the weft for wrapping by winding thread groups around pegs and separating the groups with yarns. As with other parts of India, preparation of the warp makes good use of public space. Every member of the family can find some way to be helpful. There is excitement and fascination as the warps are untied and wound before weaving begins. Often a region will become known for its patterning or for its use of color. The most well-known of the traditional designs is the Saktapur sari, which shows a distinctive checkerboard pattern. In addition to cloth for daily wear, fabric with religious purposes is also made. There is the Gita Govinda ikat, made by tying verses of script into the warp threads. Many pieces are also associated with the Jagannath temples, showing specific figures and stories. Only a small portion of ikat production is for export. Mostly the weavers work for local markets. The connection between hand weaver and local culture is still very much alive. In the west of India lies the state of Gujarat. Long famous for the exquisite embroidery of its tribal cultures, Gujarat is also the home of some of the finest weavings in the world. Patan is well known for the production of the complicated and elaborate double silk ikat, and for the unique mushroom cloth. Mushroom cloth is an example of a weaving innovation to avoid a cultural prohibition. In Muslim culture, an individual should not wear silk against the skin. A mushroom weave is made from cotton and silk fibers in such a way that the silk warp exists almost entirely on the outside of the fabric. The cotton thread weft remains on the inside and keeps the silk from touching the skin of the wearer. One has the luster and sheen of silk on the outside where it may be seen. Mushroom means permitted. At the pinnacle of the prestige cloths is the double ikat, made by tying and dyeing both warp and weft threads with natural dyes. These are only woven in 3 countries in the world: India, Indonesia, and Japan. Of the 3, the most illustrious is without doubt the complex and detailed silk patan patola made in Gujarat, India. A single cloth may take months to prepare as the fibers are tied and untied to dye the different colors. The setup of the loom and the actual weaving are also time-intensive procedures. Double ikat is woven on a single heddle frameless loom. These valuable textiles have been closely associated with royalty in Southeast Asia, and the patan patola has been actively sought after and traded in that area. The vivid designs were often imitated on other textiles. The double ikat is woven by the Salvi community, who are believed to have moved from South Maharashtra in the 12th century. Legend has it that at that time, King Kumarpal of the Solanki dynasty invited 700 families of patola weavers from Jalna to settle in Patan in North Gujarat. Since the Second World War, these complex double ikats have been produced by only 2 families. Like many traditional crafts, the future hangs in balance between artisan and market.
Loom over here in this village is like a part of the family. Every household here has one loom, and it's like day in and day out people go out to work, they come back to work, but they always find some time to work on the looms, and the children, when they see their fathers or their mothers or their grandfathers sitting and weaving, they learn the whole thing in the process. And the man, when he has gone out to the farms to do a little bit of farming, the woman probably sits and weaves a little bit. In the evenings, the husband comes back, she weaves a little bit. I mean, everyone in a family weaves here. Weaving is more natural. They just sit and weave when they want. They just go out when they want. They just take a break. They come back and weave. Probably they weave sometimes throughout the night. It's like reading a book for them. It's so much a part of their lives.
India has a resource which exists nowhere else in the world. Hundreds of thousands of craftspeople who have worked for generations at their art. This abundance of talent and tradition has belonged to India for hundreds of years. The Romans named the gossamer textiles from India nebula, so breezy and mist-like were those delicate fabrics. Made of the finest of silks and spun cottons, these materials were also known as light catchers and woven air.
This is an old garment from the late 1800s. Beautiful, beautiful garment. It's all hand stitched. But what the cotton is a hand woven, what's called momo. And this is a very, very fine hand spun, hand woven cotton done in Bengal. Bengal became famous all over the world for its momos, its gossamer cottons. Nowhere else in the world has cotton been able to be woven so fine as in Bengal. Partly this came about because of the extreme heat and humidity of Bengal, particularly of south of Calcutta, and the need for layers of cotton and garments that kept that, were comfortable in that heat and in that high humidity. All hand stitched too. Fabulous, fabulous, and small detail of hand embroidery. So this was an experiment that we did to see if it was possible in a contemporary situation to get the 400 count momo. So this is cotton woven in Bengal just 3 months ago, and this it's hard to get across exactly how soft and how fine, and it's just like cloud, it's like air.
The main tricky technical part of weaving a 400 counts is the warping of the 400 counts yarn. In the weft you can introduce any count of yarn, it's not difficult at all, but the tricky part is the warping such fine yarn. It's almost like nothing is there. It's exactly why they used to call it the woven air. Another problem with the 400 counts is they can only weave in the dawn for a few hours, and they can weave in the dusk for a few hours, and the rest of the day the loom just lies idle because either the temperature is too high or the humidity is too high, and the cotton warps, they start snapping and they can't weave. And also the hand spinning of the 400 counts is they spin a very limited amount of cotton yarn of such fine counts like 400 or 500. So in a year, if there is no yarns, they can't weave, obviously.
উইভিং এ সবথেকে আমার যেটা ভালো লাগে যে ডিজাইন, যে আমাদের যে শাড়িতে পাড়ের নকশাগুলো হতো।
The best part of weaving. What I like is the design part, what we do for the jacquard looms. Initially what we used to work on were single jacquard machines. Now we work on double jacquard machines.
আমরা যখন শুরু করেছিলাম তখন যেরকম সিঙ্গেল মেশিনে করতাম, মানে সারা বডিতে যে
I'm really fascinated with all the patterning that we do in the borders and in the body of the fabric.
শাড়িগুলোর দামও অনেক বেড়ে গেল এবং দেখতেও সুন্দর হলো।
The design has developed quite a bit from what we used to do earlier until now.
এবং শাড়ির কোয়ালিটিটাও,
This is what I like. It is the best part of weaving.
এটাও খুব সুন্দর, এটা আমার কাছে সবথেকে ভালো লাগে। পার্টিকুলার আমার সেরকম মানে যেহেতু উইভিং এর মধ্যে আছে সবই ভালো লাগে, কারণ ভালো করে লাগাতে হয়।
Actually, there's nothing about weaving that we don't like. We are all weavers, so we have to weave. There's nothing in particular that we don't like about weaving.
ভালো লাগে না এরকম কিছু।
That is what we do.
সবগুলোই ভালো লাগে।
all the looms over they're all pit looms, and there's a hole which is dug inside the ground, and the loom is set on the hole, and the weaver actually sits half of his body inside underground and half is on top. Due to extreme heat and humidity here, the warps are kept closer to the ground level. But this also poses a problem in the monsoons because of so much of rains and flooding happening all over that sometimes the water, the soil becomes very loose, and the frames of these looms, they become so loose that when they weave, the whole loom starts shaking and they can't weave anymore.
We don't like weaving during the monsoons. During the rains, all the pits are filled with water and it makes our weaving very difficult. So we don't like particularly the monsoon season.
That was a, yeah, I mean, suddenly when we had a production going on for a particular client, so suddenly we were seeing that the scarves were coming and they were all like few inches shorter. Immediately I called up the person in charge over here and I said, what's wrong? I mean, I've seen for twice now that the scarves which are coming over are all smaller size. The weaver shows him that yes, there are 2 points there and here, and I'm just weaving from point to point, so I can't go wrong. I'm perfectly okay. Last he goes to this drummer, the person who drums the yarn, and the person who is supposed to measure the exact size of the scarf and put marks on the warp. And he starts talking to the drummer, and the drummer says, "Yeah, it's fine. It's absolutely okay. Here's my tape measure, and I'm measuring this with this tape, and it's okay. I mean, I've exactly put the size which you've asked me to do, so I've not gone wrong." And in the meantime, when both of them were having the conversation, the drummer's wife, he comes in and he overhears their conversation. And suddenly he goes, "Yeah, no, but actually I told you to take a little more extra because the rat came and ate up the tape, and I just chopped off like 2 inches from inside and I sewn it back." He calls me up and I'm like frustrated. I'm like, buy a new tape and give it to him. I can't, I mean, it's out. I mean, I couldn't even dream in my wildest dreams that someone can just chop off a measuring tape from in between and sew it back and just be so casual about it. This was one, and there was another when we were having our production order, which we were running late by already a week, and we were really tensed about it because the client was calling up and asking for the scarves, and we were just telling her, hold on, it's just another week, we would need another week to finish it. And suddenly in the morning, my manager here, he calls up and he says that there's a bad news. So I thought, what, someone has died or something? And he goes, the cat has jumped on the warp, and the warp he has torn the warp totally. So we have to rewarp, which means another 25 days to rewarp and then weave those. So it was like a nightmare. I mean, I couldn't even imagine that a cat can jump on a warp, and it's good that these kind of experiences, we get these experiences, because then we say these to our clients and they expect that these unnatural things can happen at times.
With Bengal, what we found, where there's so much knowledge, is in the knowledge of the thread, and knowledge of over-twisting thread, under-twisting thread, pre-shrinking thread, and so forth, to get that textural feeling of cloth. For instance, this cloth, many people think that it's elastic in there, that is giving it the gathering or giving it the puckering, but it's not. It's an over-twisted yarn that the weaver works with. It's very complex. This one here is a fabulous, fabulous cloth. This is silk. This one here is silk, all silk, warp and weft, naturally dyed. This one here, it's got a gold weft and a black warp, silk by silk. But what's happened here, which is very interesting, is that as the weaver has been weaving the cloth, he has, at very consistent intervals, taken the warp and moved it slightly with his thumb. And this has given a fabulous texture. Okay, this one here, it's 3 layers connected both on the warp and the weft to create a pocket. Basically 3 warps and wefts, and then connected by these lines. So the first one is silk. The second one is metal, so it's this metallic that's inside. And the third top is another silk. You get to use the metallic thread without it irritating the skin at all, and yet it gives that great sheen of the gold. 2, 3, 4 warps and wefts and connected at different points. This is something we found a lot of skill in Bengal, and hadn't seen it at this level and of this quality and the finest of the threads anywhere else.
There are over 10,000 families that are in this village who came from East Bengal, and they always lived in communities. So when they migrated from Bangladesh during the partition of Bengal, they all stayed together, and they came and moved in here. So the land proved to be exactly what they needed, that they had space for growing their rice, they had space for making a pond to fish and also to grow their vegetables, and at the same time have a loom, because all these people knew how to weave. And I think that's the reason why there are so many weavers in one particular area, and everyone weaves. Everyone has 1 or 2 looms and everyone weaves.
Yes, all of us know how to weave. Even our sisters know how to weave on the semi-automatic loom and also on the simple hand looms.
So I've seen a lot of families where the son has not taken up the job anymore of weaving, and slowly a lot of families just had the father weaving and the son was doing something else.
When you go to a country like India, which is industrializing very fast and getting richer, you will find that people who had been weavers, who were from weaving families, actually don't want to go into it. They either want to have got an education and they want to go and play around with computers. And that's a tricky balance. You've got, if it was a child of mine, I'd say go into computers.
Would I teach my children how to weave? No, I don't think so. When we weave saris, there is too much fluctuation. There were some days when we didn't have any money to buy food, and there were some days that were okay. So I'm a bit worried about this in my trade, and that's why I'm not sure I would want my children to become weavers. I would prefer that they study and have a regular job or business so that the income is more consistent. On the other hand, if you talk about the export side, where we are doing scarves and other items, this has a good market. We are seeing that it is growing. But if you were to ask me if I want my children to be in the business of weaving saris, then no. But if the export side continues and we get to make scarves and other items, then I would want my children in the trade, because it is growing and we can see that. But here we see the sari market going down, quite a drastic change. In the cities it seems the women don't wear them. We're scared that in a few years the sari market will be totally dead. If my children showed an interest in weaving, if they wanted to do it, of course I would be happy to teach them. I wouldn't stop them from learning.
What I really think about the future, the younger generation doesn't learn the trade, learn how to weave, there would be no one to take it up. There would be no one who would weave anymore. In general, I really wish everyone would start wearing handloom made products. I mean, that would be an ideal world for me. Everyone wears handloom made product, because to me, when you wear a clothing, the most important thing is the feeling that you get from wearing a shirt or a skirt or a blouse. And handloom can produce such beautiful, soft, delicate, thick, fat, any form of fabric, and it's always very beautiful. The hand of the fabric of a handloom fabric is always very nice because of the irregularities, because it's a human being sitting and setting each pick one after the other. He's putting the one weft to the other, and so that I think lends to a very unique character and feeling to the handloom fabrics, which can't be duplicated by machines at all. For the future of the handlooms, I really wish that it would grow more and more, and these weavers would be just weaving meters and meters and meters of fabric for everyone, and everyone would be wearing them and enjoying the feel of such a beautifully handmade fabrics.
Ego, naci te